Crypto, to me, was a chance to build something. It was attractive to me because it was a chance to change the system.
Who are you?
The founder of Flare Network. I enjoy building things, and I enjoy finding areas in the economy that I think I can add value to. Started building Flare in 2018, really. And we're still doing effectively the same thing. And our team grows. We've managed our corporate capital very well. Most people still have this slight concept in their head, I think, that money is somewhat like the gold standard used to be. There's some intrinsic value to money, and there isn't. The intrinsic value now comes from you have to pay your taxes with it. The first network that is a layer 1 Ethereum virtual machine chain, that means it has smart contract that integrates data directly into the network. So we have price oracles and oracles for what has happened on other networks called state oracles, and oracles for Web 2 databases that are baked into the validation. A good analogy for that, London as a financial center 50 years ago, being a hub between Asia, Europe, and the US. If you think of each of those geographic locations as different tokens, XRP, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, London was a place where you came to do business between the world markets. Flare will be a place where people will come to do business, DeFi, between different token markets. Flare is working to unlock the value of assets that currently can't be used that well, but more importantly than that, maybe unlock that value in a decentralized and non-custodial way.
Hey everyone, welcome to Drops, a podcast series where we showcase rising projects and founders that are not yet mainstream but have a huge potential in the crypto space. Since When Shift Happens started to take off, we've received hundreds of requests from incredible teams every month that we had to turn down. Not because they weren't good enough, but because they weren't yet the right fit in terms of scale and visibility. And this is changing now. With the Drops series, we're building on the credibility of When Shift Happens to give a voice to the next generation of builders shaping the future of crypto. Drops isn't a research service or an endorsement. It's a platform to spotlight the potential breakout founders of tomorrow. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Very good.
How long are you here for?
Until tonight.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm having the privilege to see you just before you leave.
If you call it a privilege. Yes.
Beautiful. Where are you going back to?
Dubai.
Dubai.
Yeah.
Do you live there?
Yes.
Why do you live in Dubai?
Mostly, the precipitating reason I had to go there was that the UK made it impossible for me to launch a token from a tax perspective. It was unknown what the tax situation would be, both personally and for the company. So, if you're faced with essentially a tax bill that puts you out of business and destroys the project, as a responsible founder, you have to get your ducks in a row and go somewhere. And Dubai is, of the places that are, very tax efficient. Dubai is a very large city, very well structured. They make it really easy for people to go there, if they're the right kind of people. And they're very welcoming. They really just want to get on in the world, and they've built their city as a place for people with skills to go and to live, frankly, at least a materially better life than the life they could have lived wherever they come from. I think there's some catching up to do in terms of cultural, just in terms of lots of people come through Dubai all the time. And it means that the kind of population is changing so much all the time that there's very little lasting critical mass of people, which makes it developing a culture harder. Obviously they have their own culture, the Emiratis, and then each group that comes has their own culture, but there isn't a cohesive Dubai, cultural sort of thing.
What's your thought on the UK 2025?
I think the government's making every single wrong decision they could ever possibly make. I think Ed Miliband calling out the greatest entrepreneur of our time personally during the Labour conference sure, he may not like him. He may not like what Elon Musk represents in terms of politics. That's fine. But not to put your country before your own political persuasions is just irresponsible as a citizen and and especially as a politician.
Can you explain what happened for those who are not aware?
So he basically said that, you know, the rise of the right wing, and which he terms, you know, effectively anti-democratic and fascist and all of that kind of stuff, can be encapsulated in two words: Elon Musk. And he then gave some quite, you know, strong suggestions to Elon Musk to get out of British politics, to get out of the, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a man that has created Starlink, created a rocket company, has probably done the most of any people to reduce carbon footprint, right? And, you know, you've got some guy that's frankly never done anything else in his life other than be a politician. Doesn't have one millionth of the talent of someone like Elon Musk, you know, standing up in front of thousands of people and being reported in the news that Britain doesn't want the world's greatest entrepreneur. I mean, politicians in a democracy should firstly be able to tolerate the viewpoints of the other side. I think that's kind of a key and critical aspect of democracy. And secondly, I think our politicians should be sober and make calculated judgments as to what is the best path of action. Turning away people who are highly entrepreneurial, or anyone, you know, who is productive in the economy because they don't hold your viewpoints, and doing it so explicitly is just really bad policy. And this is the energy secretary of the UK. And then, of course, you know, all the arrests for free speech and, you know, for really quite limited, like, as far as I can see, the things that people are saying are, you know, of course, some people are really like disgusting and say terrible things. But I kind of believe that free speech should be a right, unless you're directly inciting specific violence against a specific group or people that can be acted upon. Like, I think what they're doing in the UK is going to end up harming the economy, the country, the political spectrum, you know, and I think the reaction to that will be, like, I think they're courting a really unpleasant reaction on the right. And I think, you know, I wouldn't want to open that box. Can't see how that's valuable. You know, the UK doesn't have that much going for it. You know, it needs to get on and figure out what its business plan is. But yeah, that's my take.
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm the founder of Flare Network. I am originally British, currently somewhat nomadic. What else as to say who I am? I mean, how deep to go with that question?
You can go as deep as you want.
I'm a father and a husband. And, you know, I enjoy building things, and I enjoy finding areas in the economy that I think I can add value to. So, and I like building teams, and I like building products.
Tell me something about yourself or your life that can help me and the audience trust more what you'll tell us today.
How can my life help someone trust something? That's a really interesting question. I've never considered it. I like to be with my family and my friends. I hope sometimes that I'm a good son. Yeah, I'm not extravagant.
That's a good one, actually.
You know, coming to crypto conferences is often one of the most demeaning experiences I've ever had, because you really get the sense that a lot of people are in it just for the money, and that's fine. Being in something for money is a thing and useful, but I think you have to be passionate about what you're doing rather than just the rewards. And, I think at Flare, um, and with many of the opportunities I've had that have come my way, I've turned down all of those that have been really a quick win and sketchy. I haven't, always been successful in all of that just from a judgment perspective.
Mm.
But I hope that we've been around a long time. Started building Flare in 2018, really, and we're still doing effectively the same thing. And our team grows. We've managed our corporate capital very well, and that's because we have an objective both for the network and for the industry.
When did you realize that crypto and blockchain was a big thing, such a big thing that you wanted to dedicate the rest of your career to it?
So I think, when did I realize that? I kind of got like a frog in a pot, right? It starts out in cold water, gets in, and the water temperature rises but doesn't notice. Kind of started looking at it in, say, 2012, a little bit, just, heard about Bitcoin and those kind of things. I think really I came out of finance and I left finance. I went to study machine learning and I was looking for an area to build in. And I think my background had left me quite cynical on the financial industry and the way that money works. And I think that it's fair to say that many people in crypto are very cynical about that. But the way that value works in the world and the way that fiat currencies are so far away from what most people's conception of what a currency should be, right? Which is that a small group of people in a room have really this godlike control over people's life through the setting of the interest rates and money printing.
Mm-hmm.
And most people still have this slight concept in their head, I think, that money is somewhat like the gold standard used to be. That it's like there's some intrinsic value to money, and there isn't. It's the intrinsic value now comes from you have to pay your taxes with it. That's kind of where money derives its value. And so I think crypto to me was a chance to build something and to build something. It was attractive to me because it was a chance to change the system. And, if you're successful in that area, then you can say you have done something. And to me, that's valuable.
Change the system. Let's go a bit deeper. One of your motivations about decentralization is to see crypto as a tool against eroding middle class wealth.
Absolutely. So if you print money and if you set interest rates in the wrong place, and if you export your currency around the world in order to enable countries to produce goods more cheaply, sure, you get a bigger total size of the economy. And that is true, right? The economy today is larger, even factoring inflation, than it was 20, 30 years ago. And some people might say that's enough, and that's good. But we had Jimmy Goldsmith, who's a famous British financier, a very interesting interview with Charlie Rose a long time ago. He's long dead. And he talked about the dangers of essentially joining the World Trade Organization and lowering tariffs and this and that. And at the expense of the middle class in the West. There has been effectively a push to move large streams of value out of the West and replace it with financialism, which is then controlled by a few bankers in a room because they set the interest rate and they set how much money is printed. And so that really takes away any power from the middle class or from the people to have any role in the country. Because if everything's financialized and it's controlled by a very small group of people, then you've essentially taken away the agency of that group of people. And then democracies can't function, and they don't. They don't function well because, instead of your vote doesn't mean as much if you don't control the money supply. So that's kind of my axe on why I think crypto is interesting. I think that, it becomes a source of value that is a defense against external agents from expressing any form of participation in the system. And that's, I think the participation in the system of people in democracies in the West has collapsed. Not just because they don't vote, but because their vote doesn't mean what it should do. If you're on a gold standard and you have a vote, and you have politics that you control, then you're voting for something that matters. If your vote doesn't affect the money supply, then effectively someone else is running the country.
So the vote here, people, is to move their cash or assets into crypto, and hopefully crypto, I don't want to say takes over, but almost, right? Or at least becomes an alternative and enables them through more wealth to have kind of a bigger say.
Yeah, I don't think it's just a question of more wealth. It's a question of just preserving the wealth, right? Like, what can you do if over 2 to 3 generations, the quality of life and the standard of living and things collapses? How can you say that's a good thing? Of course, crypto is very volatile against fiat currencies. But I think, my thesis has always been the same. At some point, fiat currencies, are going to have a problem. There's just too much debt. There's as far as I understand it, there's $1 million of debt per family in the US. That's just that's not sustainable. And so at some point there has to be an end to that. And at the moment, there isn't a better alternative than crypto.
And that's one of the reasons you think that Bitcoin will reach $1 million long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, my sort of medium-term thesis is 500K.
What's medium term for you?
2 to 3 years. But I think like the idea of pricing it in dollars at some point becomes meaningless. I think I don't know if it becomes a medium of exchange. I don't think it's that kind of thing. I think it just becomes a value store. Of course, you've got the whole real world as well, right? Like, all of that has to function. And I think it's going to take a long time to build out the rails where crypto and not just stablecoins actually becomes a medium of exchange.
It probably becomes more like a home or like a house. If you think about, I think I don't know how many decades ago, right? I mean, I think our parents' generation, at least my parents' generation, they needed 3 yearly salary to kind of cover their house.
Yeah.
And now it's like 12 or 13. So basically it became almost impossible to buy a house for the new generation. Or you look at it.
And that's in a country, by the way, that restricts non-Swiss citizens from buying property. They're only allowed to buy certain properties of a certain size and all that kind of stuff. In other countries, that's not the same. Like 12 years is not the same. It can be 20 or 30.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually looking myself. And then you look at, okay, do I really want to buy this flat or this house? Even the price, the mortgage rate, and the amount of capital you need to put as a down payment and what you can do with this versus the rent you would pay.
Yeah.
And you're like, actually, almost never makes financial sense. And I still have like a lot of friends or people who think or who say, you need to buy real estate, it's a good investment, it's a good investment. And I would say like the normies, they kind of all think that real estate is a good investment, it's going to go up, it goes up forever. Everyone I talked to on this podcast were the people who actually made a lot of money and who actually think about all these things. They think very differently, right?
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, real estate in some geographic locations can make sense to buy. It has been a very nicely performing asset. In Europe, you know, the problem with real estate in Europe is it's just unaffordable, you know, against people's salaries.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we're in Singapore here, like, it's insane.
Oh, Singapore
You're
is
just thinking again, you're like, okay, but what can I do with this money if I don't put it there? Like, I can buy so many Bitcoin and it's going to be so much more in the future.
Yeah.
Like, I'll buy a house with 1 Bitcoin or 2 in the future. I can wait another few years, right? Low time preference.
It's not even that. It's the yield on real estate, at least in the many of the markets I'm aware of, it's just terrible. Like, you're really paying. There's this premium to real estate for this sort of kind of almost illusory safety thing. You know, look, I guess if there was hyperinflation, it could be really problematic if you're a renter, because you know the rental price can be changed by the landlord. That's an issue. But then, you know, if there was hyperinflation, who knows what happens to the economy? I think everything goes out of the window in terms of the way people relate to the economy.
You're the co-founder and CEO of Flare Network. What is Flare Network? If you had to explain it to your Uber driver.
Absolutely. So it's really the first network that is a layer 1 Ethereum virtual machine chain. That means it has smart contracts that integrates data directly into the network. So we have price oracles and oracles for what has happened on other networks called state oracles, and oracles for Web 2 databases that are baked into the validation of the network. So instead of using a small set of entities to get that data, we use every validator on Flare. And those validators are staked, and their power is apportioned through stake. And this effectively makes data more decentralized. We've also worked very hard on the data systems themselves, rather than just decentralization, but also how they can be used and how efficient they are. Which means we can do some really cool things without having to rely on other protocols. So for instance, so with the blockchain for data, but you know, one of the first things we're starting with as kind of a product vertical is being able to take tokens that don't have smart contracts and really use them judiciously and wisely in DeFi. And just to give you an example, you know, other people can do that. Of course, they haven't particularly, except with Bitcoin, and we're focusing very heavily on XRP because we think there's an opportunity there. But our data protocols allow us to do things, not just building bridges. Many people have built bridges and message passing protocols and things. But we can then very easily at the blockchain layer, we can build ways to abstract things out. So we're working on a smart account system for XRP so that you can control your transactions on Flare directly through transactions on the XRP ledger. So rather than having to go and buy Flare and bridge your XRP to Flare and then use Flare as a separate network, you can effectively just make transactions on the XRP ledger that give directions on Flare to put tokens in protocols or send a payment or whatever it is you want.
Give me a Web 2 or normal world analogy for someone who has no idea about crypto, is trying to understand like what you guys do and why it's kind of important and changing the game.
Okay, so that particular account abstraction example, I'd say the first analogy that comes to my head is, people used to go and research things for days, right? Do a Google search to try and get a bunch of links and then go through the links. Now they get AI to summarize it for them and then go through the links if they're interested in it. So Flare's account abstraction for XRP effectively is a bit like that, in that we kind of do the annoying hard Google searching work for you by allowing you to make your transactions directly on the XRP ledger without having to come to Flare. A Web 2 analogy for Flare itself is that kind of gets to my bigger thesis of why we've built what is effectively a hub chain. A hub chain for XRP. So we've added XRP on Flare, and at a later date we will be adding Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, possibly Stellar. We've built out a very strong DeFi ecosystem already, ready for these tokens. And I think there's value in all of these tokens, which hold very large amounts of value, to be able to come and be used in a single unified system. And, a good analogy for that is something like, London as a financial center, maybe, 50 years ago, being a hub between Asia, Europe, and the US. If you think of each of those geographic locations as different tokens, XRP, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, London was a place where you came to do business between the world markets. Flare will be a place where people will come to do business, DeFi, between different token markets. And that's I think the best analogy I can come up with.
It's very good. I like it. Makes it also much clearer for me. You mentioned your big focus is XRP. Why?
So, two things. There's an opportunity with XRP. So if you're building essentially a network that intends to take value, that allow people to use value from lots of different chains that don't have smart contracts, well, you could start with Bitcoin. It's a fairly well-served market already with some relatively centralized solutions and then some more decentralized solutions. XRP has been underserved by the market in terms of smart contract capabilities, DeFi, and whatever other things you want to do beyond DeFi. So the opportunity there was just in terms of being able to get market share very high. And I've long been, a believer in XRP anyway, amongst other tokens, of course, just from the economic standpoint of having a token of value that can move very quickly. That was one of the things that got me into it. But also, I liked what the XRP ledger and Ripple were trying to build around XRP, which was a global payment system. Obviously, theses change over time, and but what I see in XRP is a massive store of value, which is currently underutilized, which should be better utilized, and that's what we've been building.
What's your answer to a pretty large part of the crypto native people saying that XRP is questionable, or even sometimes they say it's a scam? What do they not understand?
I don't think it's what they don't understand. I think XRP was a direct challenge to Bitcoin when it started, because it started quite a long time ago. And I think, religions, I would characterize crypto as quasi to a religious movement, right? they form, and usually when they form, they're at their most dramatic, fundamentalist. And I think, if you compare, say, the centralization, the Bitcoin argument against XRP is that it is less decentralized than Bitcoin. It's arguable how you quantify decentralization. I'm not going to argue that it is as decentralized as Bitcoin. That would be, insane. But we've seen hundreds of chains launch, which are far, 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 far more centralized than XRP. And the same arguments made against XRP and against Ripple holding XRP and not made against those chains. And so I think, by virtue of being early, XRP was called out. Were they launching today? Absolutely no one would bat an eyelid. And I think the other thing is that, people are like, oh, Ripple holds too many tokens. Well, I'd rather Ripple holds the tokens than, a bunch of KOLs and VCs, right? Which is effectively how chains are launching today. They're launching with extremely low floats and massive chunks just given to VCs and KOLs. So, I mean, and you can criticize the chains launching today and you can criticize Ripple and XRP if you want. I'm just saying, like, if you want to be a Jesuit, or an early believer in a new religion of crypto, and you're not prepared to see some changes, then that's fine, but you're not going to disseminate the core tenets of what we're all trying to do very effectively, right?
What's one of the biggest strengths in the XRP ecosystem that you can directly feel when you're building on and in the ecosystem?
By far and large, the community. It has a very broad community and a very engaged community. They call it the XRP Army.
I was about to say the XRP Army. Yeah. I recorded a podcast with Chris Larson in San Francisco, and I could feel the power of the XRP Army when you post something. Everybody's going crazy.
And, I have a lot of people in crypto deride the XRP Army because they, have this outdated view of what XRP is and what Ripple is. When I looked at consensus protocols, the Ripple, consensus protocol is a really lovely one. The answer is, if you want better performance than Bitcoin, you have to make some sacrifices. Unless technology changes, less there's more research. But ultimately, every chain since Bitcoin has made the same sacrifices. So it's to me, it's just like a nonsense argument. But the community is the best part of building in that area. If they're interested in what you're doing, they will back you hard. And it gives you a lot of leverage when you go to make deals with people, and making deals with people is necessary. Like, let's just give you a good example. So we airdropped the first 15% of our token to the XRP community, and then we distributed effectively the rest, other than the tokens we hold, to whoever held Flare. And that distribution is still going on until January 2026. But we had this big question, because a large amount of XRP is held on exchanges. We had this big question as to, how do we get the exchanges to support this? Because if we don't get the exchanges to support this, then only a few people are going to get it, and then large XRP holders are going to miss out. Well, we had one exchange support it, early. People started moving their XRP to that exchange. And then we had a second. People started moving their XRP to that exchange. And then we had every exchange come to us and be like, we can't afford to lose all of this XRP. effectively. And so please, work with us to support it. And we eventually got every exchange, including Coinbase, to support the distribution of our token. And that's the power of the XRP Army.
What's the next big ecosystem that you intend to help or work with after XRP, and why?
So I'm looking for things that add value to both XRP and to Flare, complementary assets. So, I think the logical place to start is Bitcoin. I'm not sure if it will be the next ecosystem we support, just because the engineering for it is harder, is lengthy. There's some lower hanging fruit, for instance, Litecoin or Dogecoin that might be easier. But Bitcoin is a good one. I think having XRP and Bitcoin both available in the DeFi ecosystem on Flare, together with stable coins and all the other derivative coins and staking coins, we should discuss XRP staking. It's kind of like the biggest, what I think of the biggest reason to come to Flare if you're not that familiar with DeFi. But I think having XRP and Bitcoin on the same chain, traded against each other, borrowed, lended against each other, both usable in perps dexes as margin, I think this makes for an interesting ecosystem.
Tell me about this XRP staking thing.
So one of the things we realized was that just offering cookie cutter DeFi protocols that are drawn from other ecosystems, yes, they're absolutely useful. You have some prerequisites for building an ecosystem, such as exchanges, money markets, perps, a whole bunch of infrastructure stuff, wallets, and this kind of stuff. But we wanted to create a protocol that effectively, XRP has very large distribution to non-degens, right? And in fact, the whole industry is going the same way, which is basically, how do I put my money somewhere and it make me money, but me not have to worry about it? That's particularly useful with XRP because the distribution is very wide, and not, the distribution is perhaps less familiar with DeFi than other ecosystems. So we thought, okay, what can be done with like a large amount of XRP as capital? There's obviously lots of financial things, like financially transformative things you can do, such as borrow against and all that kind of stuff. But that's something an individual really has to work on and like manage. So we approached a very large, effectively DeFi entity in the US that we know well and works with us on our ecosystem, called Centaura. We said, look, we think there's a really great opportunity here to build a very simple product for XRP holders that allows them to earn a yield, be comfortable with where that yield comes from, be comfortable that you're not messing around with the tokens whilst they're locked away, so that it's all on chain, non-custodial, and effectively a very simple protocol that enables them to get a yield on this asset that doesn't have a yield. And that's called Firelight. And its first major product is effectively ensuring blue chip DeFi ecosystems, which are incredibly low risk. So very close to staking yield, very close to the risk level of staking yield on other chains. So the slashing is extremely unlikely. So that's kind of our starting point. And from that staking protocol, you get a staked representation of your XRP, staked XRP. You can then take that staked XRP, and if you wish to, you can do more with it in the ecosystem, either yourself, or you can hand it off to a manager, what's known as a risk curator, to effectively work it for you by going to get yield further on that staked XRP. So that lets you get yield on the base XRP and then yield on the staked XRP, which increases your yield on effectively on the base XRP. And that's kind of, really the start of the flywheel for Flare.
What's one thing that people should remember from today's conversation?
I think that, Flare is working to unlock the value of assets that currently, can't be used that well. But more importantly than that, maybe, unlock that value in a decentralized and non-custodial way. I can go to lots of people with my Bitcoin and borrow against it, but they can also run away with it. And I've got to over collateralize. It's centralized, it runs risks that I don't want, that I purposefully left the industry, the financial industry, to get away from. So, I think that's probably the key message. The other message is that, we are looking beyond just DeFi in terms of what we can do with our data capabilities. We're building out a compute capability at Flare that is going to extend smart contracts so that they can do a lot more. And I think that for us is the next iteration of where we end up.
Amazing. Thank you, Hugo, for doing this.
My pleasure.
It was a great conversation.
Thank you.